There is a version of you that ate tree bark and survived. Not as a metaphor, not in some distant evolutionary abstraction. A version of you, genetically nearly identical, sat in a cave in what is now South Africa, or crouched on a frozen European plain, and put something in their mouth that you would not recognize as food, because there was nothing else. Nothing, and yet here you are, their direct descendant. Reading this. The outcome is already known. We made it. But the question nobody actually asks is, what did making it cost? What did your ancestors eat when the answer was nothing, and what did eating it do to the species that came out the other side? That question has 5 floors, and by the time we reach the bottom, the word famine stops being about food at all. Floor 5. The outcome. Humans are, by a significant margin, the fattiest primate on Earth. A healthy chimpanzee carries roughly 9% body fat. A healthy human, not overweight, not underweight, just healthy, carries between 14 and 31%. Duke University biologist Herman Pontzer documented this discrepancy in 2019 and called humans the fat primate. A title that doesn't flatter us, but does explain something enormous. We didn't develop this surplus by accident. We developed it because the bodies that could store energy were the ones that survived the gaps. And the gaps came. Constantly, seasonally, catastrophically, your ancestors were not always well fed. That idea, the hunter-gatherer living in easy abundance, feasting from a generous landscape, is largely a modern projection. Climate shifted, droughts came, ice advanced, herds moved. Winters in Pleistocene Europe could last 8 months. The Last Glacial Maximum, roughly 21,000 years ago, pushed human populations in Europe to the edge of extinction. Some groups disappeared. Some survived. The ones that survived did it by eating things that we have never classified as food, because the classification of what counts as food was written by people who had enough of the normal kind. That body fat you carry? It's not a design flaw. It's a memory. Biological memory of 10,000 gaps that almost killed everyone. Now go back. Because the outcome makes no sense without the mechanism. Floor 4. What the body does when the food stops. Within 12 to 14 hours of your last meal, your liver glycogen, the stored glucose your brain runs on, begins to deplete. By hour 20, your metabolism shifts. Insulin drops. The body begins mobilizing fat. By hour 48, something more specific kicks in. Your liver starts converting fatty acids into ketone bodies. And your brain, which normally refuses almost everything but glucose, begins accepting them as fuel at a rate that can cover roughly 75% of its energy needs. This is not a modern discovery or a wellness influencer invention. This is ancient machinery. A 2018 paper by researchers including Jana Freese, published in a peer-reviewed nutrition journal, argued that metabolic flexibility, the ability to swing between glucose burning and fat burning without crisis, was not just an adaptation, but likely the defining physiological trait of our genus. The human body doesn't break down under starvation the way a lab-bred animal does. It reorganizes, smoothly, efficiently, as if it has done this before. Because it has done this before. For 3 million years. But the body reorganizing its fuel system buys time. It doesn't buy food. So the deeper question is, what did they actually put in their mouths? If that just reframes something for you, hit like. It's the only signal that tells the algorithm this exists. Floor 3. What they actually ate. Start with what's obvious and work toward what isn't. When large prey was unavailable, smaller animals filled the gap. Rodents, reptiles, amphibians, birds and their eggs. Evidence from 1.95 million-year-old deposits at Koobi Fora in Kenya shows hominins butchering turtles, crocodiles, and fish alongside the more prestigious large mammals. Small animals are less prestigious, harder to see in a dramatic documentary. But they are available when the big animals aren't. Then come the insects, This is the entry most people skip over, but the evidence is real. Insects have been consumed by humans since before we were anatomically modern. A 2023 review in the journal Foods examined the archaeological and anthropological record and found entomophagy, the eating of insects, documented in virtually every region where humans have lived, across every period of the archaeological record. Termite mounds, grubs from rotting wood, beetle larvae, caterpillars, ants in nutritional terms. The argument for insects as a famine fallback is overwhelming. Grasshoppers contain roughly 20 grams of protein per 100 grams of dry weight, comparable to beef, with a significantly lower cost in energy to obtain. But insects still run away. When even insects weren't enough, the search went somewhere stranger. In 2012, Amanda Henry of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published a study that turned the field quietly sideways. She extracted plant microfossils, phytoliths, from the dental calculus of Australopithecus sediba, a hominin species that lived approximately 2 million years ago in what is now South Africa. What she found in those teeth wasn't grass or fruit or the expected savanna diet, it was wood. Bark, the hard, cellulose-dense outer tissue of trees. Sediba, the evidence suggested, had eaten tree bark. Not as a dietary preference. The isotopic signature pointed to a hominin consuming woodland foods in an environment that suggested stress. A creature eating what the forest offered because the forest wasn't offering much else. Tree bark is barely food. The inner bark, the cambium layer, just beneath the rough exterior, contains small amounts of sugars, starch, and fiber. Indigenous cultures in Scandinavia traditionally harvested pine cambium in famine years, drying and grinding it into a rough flour that could be mixed with grain. It has an energy value, just not much of one. Eating it tells you something about the circumstances, not the nutrition. What it tells you is, this is what nothing looks like. And nothing has a texture. Nothing has a flavor. Nothing is something your body will try to extract calories from anyway, because your body does not know the word futile. Now we go deeper. Because bark isn't the bottom. Floor 2. The actual bottom. Roughly 170,000 years ago, at a site called Border Cave in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa, early Homo sapiens were roasting the rhizomes of a small flowering plant called Hypoxis angustifolia. Tiny, starchy, underground storage organs, essentially the plant's buried calorie reserve. Lynn Wadley of the University of the Witwatersrand, whose team identified the charred fragments in 2020, noted the rhizomes have an energy value of approximately 500 kilojoules per 100 grams. That number sounds modest. It is modest. But cooked, and these were cooked, they become easier to digest. Their starch gelatinizes. Their cell walls break down. They become food in a way raw rhizomes simply aren't. Hypoxis grows where almost nothing else grows. Disturbed soil. Burned ground. The aftermath of drought. It is a plant that colonizes the wreckage of an ecosystem, and it appears, with striking regularity, at the sites where early humans left the evidence of their worst moments. But there's a category beneath even underground roots, and most people don't know it exists as a documented behavior. Geophagy. Eating earth. Not metaphorical earth. Actual soil. Clay. The practice is documented in 21st century clinical literature in pregnant women experiencing mineral deficiencies, in traditional cultures across sub-Saharan Africa, in chimpanzees, in indigenous groups in the Americas. A 2023 review in a geoscience journal traced geophagy across the entire recorded scope of human history and found evidence it was practiced in every major populated region on Earth, likely for thousands of years. The leading hypothesis is not psychological, but pharmacological. Specific clays contain high concentrations of calcium, iron, and zinc, minerals that the body urgently requires and that disappear rapidly during famine. Your gut knows the difference between clay and dirt. It seeks the clay. It absorbs what it needs. Somewhere between tree bark and clay soil, The question stops being about food and starts being about something harder to name. Pause here for a second. How many of these famine fallbacks did you already know about? Just give me a number. Floor 1. What the gaps actually built. Here is the reversal. And it lands quietly. The 2014 study by J. Colette Burbesque of the University of Roehampton and colleagues, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, examined data from 94 hunter-gatherer societies across the ethnographic record. The conclusion is counterintuitive enough that it took years to be widely cited. When researchers controlled for habitat quality, comparing hunter-gatherers in warm, resource-rich environments to farmers in similarly rich environments, hunter-gatherers experienced significantly less famine than agriculturalists. Not more. Less, the popular image of prehistoric people as constantly hungry, perpetually on the edge of starvation, is, at least for savanna-dwelling hunter-gatherers in reasonably hospitable environments, more or less wrong. They were hungry sometimes, seasonally, during extreme climate events. But the diet breadth of a mobile hunter-gatherer is massive compared to a farmer's. A farmer who has a bad harvest, has a bad year, and dies. A hunter-gatherer who can't find one prey switches to another. And another. And another. Down through the fallback stack, large mammals, to small mammals, to reptiles, to insects, to roots, to bark, to clay, each level extending survival a little further. Each level asking the body to do something it was, apparently, built to do. The famine gap wasn't a catastrophic anomaly in human prehistory. It was a recurring design feature, and the human body wasn't broken by it. It was, in a meaningful sense, shaped by it. That body fat, that metabolic flexibility, that extraordinary dietary range, the ability to extract nutrition from things no other large primate would touch. That's not a list of traits. That's a portfolio. Built across millions of years of gaps, by bodies that refuse to treat nothing as an ending. Subscribe if you want to follow this thread, because the next question underneath this one is why the body that survived 3 million years of famine is now destroying itself with abundance. The Harris lines tell the whole story, if you know how to read them. Archaeologists examining prehistoric human skeletons, particularly those from cold climate populations in Pleistocene Europe, find dense transverse lines running through the long bones of children, dense, bright bands visible on X-ray, caused by temporary growth arrest. The bones stopped growing, then started again, then stopped, then started, lines stacked on lines, each one a gap, each one survived. The skeletons that survived to adulthood and reproduced are the ones carrying your genome right now. Every one of them has Harris lines. Every one of them ate bark, or rhizomes, or insects, or clay, or something with no English word for it, at least once in childhood, and made it through. You are the outcome of every gap that didn't win. What's another ordinary human behavior that turns out to be ancient survival, wiring nobody questions anymore?